Okay, so it's right at 1 o'clock. So let's get rolling here. I'm so happy to have you. It looks like we have about 18 couples, which couples are singletons, which is a great size group to have. And I'm Jan Tedder. I'm a family nurse practitioner and a lactation consultant. And I'm always fond of saying I've been in this line of work longer than most of you been alive on this earth. So I've had the great privilege to work with young families really for about I'm getting close to 4 decades now. Much of that time I was in a community health center where I was working as a nurse practitioner, meaning that when your baby was born, you would come see me with your newborn, and I would do the well baby exam and the follow up exam and the sick runny nose checkups on the baby and the pap smears on the mama and the diabetic checks on the grandma. So I really worked in within a community and within a family that I think just gave me a lot of understanding about what is the main kind of struggles and questions do new families have when they enter parenthood for the first time. So I feel like I've kind of drawn from that information to put this class together today, and I'm trusting that you will find that it is a time well spent. I do like to share that you are the exception rather than the rule, I'm sorry to say, in our country, because in the US, and actually this has become an international issue, that more and more families are not seeking out that prenatal education. And I really like to have people think about, if you wake up one morning and you have a leaky kitchen faucet, you might spend an hour or so researching something on YouTube, watching a few videos, 3 or 4 trips to the Home Depot, and maybe by the end of the weekend, you'll have your leaky faucet solved. But I'm here to say that if you wake up with painful breastfeeding or a crying baby who is not gaining weight like expected, it is not the time to be doing your initial research on YouTube. First of all, there's so much on YouTube. You will be uh, hard pressed to be able to sort out evidence based information from just other people's experience and points of view. So I'm really glad for you that you chose to meet here today. I've been teaching this online course, digital course here ever since COVID started. So it's really right from the beginning. I was very concerned that our classes here at the hospital, at the major hospitals, and in the clinics just overnight shut down. And so because I have been in sort of the world of digital teaching for a lot of years, I was able to put this class together rather quickly. And I just want you to know we've had just great feedback from folks who take this class. And with these 2 hours, I believe that you will be absolutely more confident in your ability to both breastfeed your baby and to notice when you have problems that need to be solved and know when and how to get the information quickly. And it's been really satisfying to me as an educator that when if people need to follow up with me afterwards, they follow up in such a timely way that sometimes a couple of phone calls, a little tweaking, and we've solved problems that really could have caused a mother to give up breastfeeding. So that's my little pep talk about why you're here today. I hope that that proves to be the case for you. So, so let's start with just the simple question of why breastfeed. And if you would just send me a chat when you think about breastfeeding, what idea comes to mind? What is the main reason you have for breastfeeding your baby? So type me a little answer here. Maybe it's a reason that you've heard for you as the breastfeeding mother. Maybe it's a reason you've heard for the baby. Maybe it's a reason you've heard for the whole family. What comes to your mind? I love to hear what motivates you to come to class today. So Lindsay is talking about connecting with the baby. Breastfeeding is best. It's custom milk for custom baby. I love that. Better nourishment for the baby, convenient, the health benefits. strengthening the immune system. I love about GI health and the oxytocin. And somebody's wise enough to say you save some money. That's really true. Best best food for the baby, perfect for the baby. Yes. Anybody throw in something why it's perfect for the mother? It's always interesting to me that folks always mention what's perfect, how it's perfect for the baby, and it is. And yes, it'll help mother lose weight. That's great. That's great. So it looks like you have a lot of evidence based information about why breastfeeding is good for you or good for the baby. And maybe we can add on a little bit why it's good for you as the mother. But I do want to run through quickly um, the literature on the benefits of breastfeeding. It just can't stop. It's like every time we turn around, there is a more powerful reason that we want to encourage and support breastfeeding. So things you mentioned that breastfeeding is best for the baby, and certainly common illnesses, common but aggravating illnesses like ear infections and stomach infections are reduced when a baby is breastfed. Inflammatory conditions like allergies, asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease. And that's because breast milk has a protein that coats the lining of the GI tract and prevents any stray proteins, bacteria, or viruses from penetrating the GI tract and causing an inflammatory reaction in the baby's immune system. And we understand now that premature turning on of this inflammatory process, we believe now, is at the foundation of significant conditions in babies like allergies, asthma, Crohn's disease, lifelong conditions in a baby. Certainly increasing in a baby's IQ, their immune system, and even an improved response to baby shots when that becomes a part of their life. I love this new information that talks specifically about if you could imagine this scenario. Your 6 month old, you take to daycare one morning and he's laying on the floor rolling around with his little toys, and his 2 year old buddy from daycare comes up and gives him a big old smoochy kiss. And the 2 year old's got this kind of green gunky stuff running out of his nose, as 2 years old often have. And so that 6 month old comes home and you put the baby on the breast. When you put the baby on the breast, the bacteria from that gunky nose goes into your breast, bumps into your breast milk, and in real time, your breast milk creates antibodies to fight that particular bacteria. Then the baby drinks that bacteria back into their bloodstream, drinks that antibody back into their bloodstream to protect the baby. And then also that antibody is floating through your bloodstream to protect you. So it's really true that breastfeeding and breast milk is a real time prevention of the kinds of bugs and viruses that are out in the world. You'll also be glad to know that breast milk gets melatonin. Babies get melatonin from breast milk so that they can learn more about separating those days and nights. And of course, we love the fact that breast milk communicates a baby's culture, but because breast milk is flavored by the foods that you eat. And in fact, if you've often been sort of a picky eater in your life, during your baby's first year of life is a good time to explore some newer foods, because that will be teaching your baby not to be such a picky eater. But then I want you also to know that this breastfeeding is going to be protective for you. And this is the research that has been so profound in the last 10 years or so. We've known for a long time that breastfeeding helps to protect the mother from breast cancer and ovarian cancer. Very profound and significant illnesses. It also causes a decrease in postpartum bleeding because it helps the uterus to contract. As someone mentioned, it helps you lose your baby fat sooner. But what's remarkable about the act of breastfeeding, the way that the breastfeeding hormones interact with your own body's sodium, calcium, glucose, insulin level, all of this sort of your own biochemistry, that breastfeeding actually gives you a long-term protection from illness such as elevated cholesterol, elevated blood pressure, diabetes, and even when you're a little old lady, soft bones or what we call osteoarthritis. So the information that breastfeeding helps to protect mothers from cancers and cardiovascular disease is really profound. So that when I think of you cuddling up with your little baby, certainly the release of those hormones that help you bond with your baby, feel attached with your baby, feel committed to doing all the care that a little baby needs. Those hormones really help you with that. But at the same time, you are taking an action that has long-term benefits for the health and well-being of your baby and long-term benefits for you as the breastfeeding mother. And you save about $2,500 a year in not buying formula. Those breastfeeding families miss less work, so you're going to have lower healthcare costs and certainly less family stress because you're not so sick as both individuals and a family. So, partly the reason this is the case is that breast milk is alive and well. It's not a substance that we take from the cow, pasteurize, add more ingredients to it, and then give it back to the baby. It is a live substance that changes as the day goes on, as the melatonin changes, as the baby's growth and development changes, that your breast milk responds to your baby's particular needs. So, because we know that breastfeeding rocks, why doesn't everyone breastfeed? I mean, what else can you get out there in the world that is free, going to help you for the rest of your life, going to help your baby now and for the rest of your life? Why don't everyone breastfeed? So, there are a number of reasons. How about chatting me the kinds of worries you hear from mothers about why they didn't breastfeed? What have you heard about that? Why they didn't breastfeed? Send me a little note here. So pain with breastfeeding, nipple confusion. Nipple confusion indicates that a baby gets used to the bottle, so then won't go back to the breast. Remind me, we'll talk about that. Mother not having enough milk, a baby having a tongue tie, the baby not getting satisfied, the baby not being able to latch properly. Okay, well, lucky for you, we're going to be reviewing all that information today. See, because what we know to be the case is that the majority of women, I'm talking like 99% of women, can successfully breastfeed. But honestly, if they don't have the information they know ahead of time so that they can both know what to expect and know when and where to get help, then how could we expect them to be successful breastfeeding? So that's why you're here today. So, as you all know, your breasts start changing during non-pregnancy, pregnancy, and on into lactation. You probably even notice these little bumps around the nipple that are called Montgomery glands. And I just love this story that these Montgomery glands are so smart that they release a lubricant to keep the nipple soft. The lubricant has antibiotics in it to fight infection. And also, this is remarkable, the odor of that oil, an odor that you would never in your wildest imagination be able to smell, but that your baby will smell because it is the same odor as your amniotic fluid. That's right. Right from the beginning, you and your baby are connected from inside the baby to outside the baby. Okay, so what I'd like to think then is if you have begun to have changes in your breast, so those changes could be breast getting a little bigger, itching around the nipple, darkening of the areola, sometimes a little discharge from the nipple. If you've had any of these changes during pregnancy, then that means you are already succeeding as a breastfeeding mother. There is the very rare lady who does not have any changes during pregnancy. And if that is the case with you, speak to your midwife doctor or to a lactation person because you also can breastfeed, but you would need a little extra help as well. Okay, so that's kind of the outside picture. Let's think now about the inside picture. So, what we know is that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of what we call lactocytes. They are the milk factory, the place in the body, the functioning cells that are going to make your milk. And what we know to be the case that these lactocytes start to proliferate, start to get more and more of them during that third trimester of pregnancy. But your hormone progesterone kind of um, subdues those lactocytes a little bit because you don't want them making a ton of milk while you're pregnant, right? But then with the delivery of your baby, with the delivery specifically of the placenta, your progesterone level charges down and your estrogen level surges up. And that's what turns on milk production, full milk production. So here, this lactocyte, the milk factory, ready to make milk. And like any factory, you got to have some energy. And lucky for you, we have built in energy from our pituitary gland, releases the hormone called prolactin, circulates through your bloodstream, drops by your breast. And when it's there, it's going to be able to help that lactocyte make milk. But like again, any factory, you got to have doorways. You got to be able to bring the energy into the factory. But lucky for us, we have prolactin receptors, which act as doorways to grab hold of that prolactin and carry it into the cell so that when your baby's first born, you begin to make that first magical milk called colostrum. This substance has never been reproduced in the world. Getting it from mama is the only way to get that colostrum. And it is so specific to your baby that if your baby is born 2 weeks early, that colostrum has a different balance of carbohydrates, sugars, fats, and proteins than if your baby's born 1 week early or 2 weeks late. Again, your body knows exactly what your baby needs. And the other thing about colostrum is super concentrated. That's a really good thing because when your baby is inside of you, she is already practicing sucking and swallowing. You've probably seen some um, ultrasounds of your baby, maybe even sucking her thumb. So she's getting the hang of it, sucking and swallowing. But what she doesn't get to practice until she comes outside is sucking, breathing, and swallowing. So if the baby needed to drink 4 ounces the first day, the first hour or two they were born, that would be a challenge to the baby. But the colostrum is so concentrated that it allows your baby to have exactly the nutrition she needs with a very small volume. So now we want to think about moving from kind of automatic pilot to sort of mom being pilot in the sense that now the actions you take will determine the amount of milk that you make. So the first action that is so critically important is placing that baby skin to skin and spending a lot of time with the baby skin to skin, bringing the baby frequently to the breast, and then removing the milk from the breast. So, these three ideas, with every single time you put that baby skin to skin, every single time, not t shirt to t shirt, skin to skin, it increases your prolactin level. It increases the energy to make milk. Every single time the baby suckles, every single time the baby is put on the breast, you increase your doorways, you increase those prolactin receptors, which are able to grab hold of that prolactin and bring it into the cell. This process seems to be something that kind of plateaus around 2 weeks of age. And that's why in this class, I pay so much attention to these first 2 weeks of your baby's life. I've had some I remember a teenage mom saying to me one time, well, I'm kind of tired now. So what I think I'll do is I'll bottle feed formula for about 2 weeks and then I'll start breastfeeding. Well, of course, that doesn't work. And that's why we want to think about the actions you take during these first 2 weeks to increase the breast capability to bring in that energy and to make mother's milk. And then finally, when the breast is fully empty, it then makes more milk. Now, you may wonder, why am I including milk removal? Because obviously the baby is suckling. Why do we need to talk about removing the milk? Well, there's an occasional situation where this is important. Suppose your baby is born 3 or 4 weeks early. That baby's going to do just fine out in the world because we have people who are very capable of helping us with premature babies. But when that baby's born early, those muscles in the cheeks are still developing, so that sometimes those early babies will fatigue during breastfeeding and not really kind of be able to go the distance to get all the milk out of the breast. But this is an easy problem to solve. What we do is help you breastfeed regularly during the day and also several times a day to pump the breast to make sure the breast fully empty. And then that triggers that full increase surge in your milk production. So if you have a full term baby, most of the time this is not an issue at all. But if your baby's born early, then that would be something we'd help you think about. Now, I want to introduce you to one of your other new best friends, oxytocin, another circulating hormone in the bloodstream. The main function of oxytocin is it helps to get the milk from inside the breast to inside the baby's mouth. There are tiny little muscles around the sacs that hold the breast milk. And as a baby suckles, this oxytocin again is released from from the mother's brain, circulates through the bloodstream, and causes the contraction of those tiny muscles, which send the milk into the baby's mouth. So that's a really great function of oxytocin. We're really happy that it's there. But we also know that oxytocin is the love hormone. And so it really is not your imagination that breastfeeding enhances the bonding and attachment experience because that oxytocin is at work for you. Literally, the oxytocin helps to reduce more of the muscle tension in a mother and give her more of a sense of calm. Interestingly, it also makes mothers feel more sociable, like they want to talk to other mothers. And isn't that a wonderful protective mechanism of oxytocin? Because we know that when mothers talk to other mothers and share their baby with their sisters, their cousins, their next door neighbors, whether it's on Zoom or a knock on the door, that's good for the mother and good for the baby. One of my favorite stories about oxytocin is a research project that was done in Australia. I heard this researcher speak one day, and he was explaining how he had gone to a factory and he was evaluating people's ability to multitask. So they were in an office, and the participants had to do something like, answer the phone, write a note, copy it onto an index card, color code it and file it, whatever. It had a list of things to do. And so they had three groups of people doing these tasks. They had men doing them, they had non breastfeeding mothers doing it, and they had breastfeeding mothers doing it. And what was so amazing is that the breastfeeding mothers were far and away better at multitasking than anybody else. Isn't that a great idea? Because, when you're a new mom, you get to multitask a lot. The second step of this study was they said to the participants at the end of their evaluation, okay, it's the end of the day, your desk is kind of a mess. Do you want to stay late and finish tidying up, or do you want to go home and just do that first thing in the morning when you come back? Well, the men and the non-lactating women said, oh, I think maybe I'll stay and tidy up my desk. But the lactating women said, you know what? That stuff will be here tomorrow. I'll just do it tomorrow when I come in. See, I love that story because setting priorities is one of the really important challenges and skills of being a new mother. And so, again, oxytocin's on your side. And finally, it's important to notice also that while oxytocin makes you more sensitive to your baby's body language, makes you able to sort of unread and kind of understand your baby's body language, it also makes you more sensitive to the body language of those around you. So when a mother says, I feel like I'm a little bit more, more sensitive about what people say to me or criticism from people. And that's because of the oxytocin. So it's one of the steps in preparing for early parenthood and breastfeeding. Think hard about who do you want to have around your life during those first critical 1 to 2 weeks of your baby's life. I mean, if you have a sister who's really critical of this idea of breastfeeding, really thinks you're kind of over the top in your interest of breastfeeding, maybe that'd be a sister to schedule to visit when your baby's about 2 weeks old. If you have a mother-in-law who breastfed and is just such a champion of this experience, sign her up to come help you when your baby comes. Being aware that you will, in fact, be a bit more vulnerable is one of the great joys and one of the challenges to deal with as a new breastfeeding family. Now, here's the other piece of good news. All those people that love you and that are around your life, those people who are taking care of you and taking care of that baby, they also have an increase in oxytocin. Yes, even those guys, if we were to measure their oxytocin level, it would be increased, preparing them to be as involved in taking care of you and that baby as they want to be. Okay, so this is all sort of the amazing ways that your body is prepared for breastfeeding. We've discussed your reasons for breastfeeding, your kind of worries about breastfeeding, and how your body is prepared to make milk. But you are not alone. Your baby is here to help. And so I love to review just some basic reflexes that your baby brings to the breastfeeding table. The first one, or actually the first two, are the suck and the rooting reflex. So these are so much fun to see that I promise you will be demonstrating this reflex to some of your friends who come to visit. And what the reflex of the rooting reflex shows us is that if you touch the corner of a baby's mouth, the baby will actually turn toward that side, open their mouth, and receive the nipple. Then, when the baby gets on the breast and the nipple is pointing toward the roof of the baby's mouth, that triggers the suck reflex. So, the rooting reflex and the suck reflex uh, go together. So, watch this baby. He's ever so cute. Now, this mother is going to show us in slow motion. So you'll see that it's not when she touches the cheek out here. It's not the cheek. It's right at that very tiny corner of where the lip hits the cheek. And when she touches that, the baby turns right toward that side, and we hear him sucking here. Yeah. So the reason this is handy is that some babies do a very funny thing. I have my little hand knitted breast from the UK to share with you. It's somewhat humorous when newborns first go on the breast that they can go on the nipple and then they kind of wiggle their head around like, where is it, where's the milk, and you're going, it's right there, it's right where you are. But if you hold your breast in a way that as the baby and you're holding the baby, you can just touch the nipple against the corner of the baby's mouth, and the baby will turn, open their mouth, and go on the breast. So that's a really fun and handy reflex to know about. The next reflex I love you to know about is the grasp reflex. And this daddy's going to demonstrate how cool this reflex works. This father has discovered that initiating his baby's grasp reflex by putting a little pressure on the inside of the baby's palm helps the baby settle down and enhances his partner's ability to successfully breastfeed their baby. And another funny thing that babies do sometimes is a baby who's ready to eat, you get them on the breast, and sometimes that hand just kind of bounces around. Well, that does, in fact, stimulate a little bit of the letdown of the milk. But mom can find that really distracting when she's concentrating on the baby's mouth and how the baby latches. So, a partner or your mother, whoever's with you, those first day or two can occasionally trigger that grasp reflex, and that calms the baby down so that mom can more easily help the baby attach to the breast. And then the last reflex, you might have seen some of these on YouTube, is the crawl reflex, which is this sort of fun and amazing reflex that causes a baby to seek out the breast. So if you put a baby right on the mother's chest after the baby's born, you'll see the baby lift up their head, and you'll see if they're moving their head around because they are smelling your amniotic fluid around the breast. And so they will can crawl up and help themselves to their first meal. And we'll see that this begins to stimulate his own rooting reflex as he touches the side of his mouth. He knows he's in the right place. He doesn't quite latch on yet. He's determined. He's going to try again. There we go. Open wide, roll over, and starts breastfeeding. It's quite amazing. So this, sometimes the literature refers to this as self-attaching, and this is a something you could put in your birth plan if you wished, that after the baby's born, just immediately, you can even do this oftentimes with the placenta is taking its time being born, just pulling that baby up, putting the baby up on the breast, and letting that baby find their way to the breast. If a baby's born early, those instincts aren't quite as strong. So the nurse can kind of help you support the baby's bottom a little bit to kind of hold her up toward the breast while she latches. So, as I mentioned before, babies fortunately only need a little bit of milk when they are first born. So, on day one of your baby's life, her stomach is only the size of a tiny marble. That it only is going to hold about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon at a time, a tiniest amount of milk. By the time she's 3 days old, the stomach has gotten bigger and can hold, it's the size of a ping pong or a table tennis ball, and can hold about an ounce at a time. So a teaspoon or an ounce at a time. So these pictures we see of newborns cuddled up with mom holding a bottle with 2 or 3 ounces of milk in it, that is not what a newborn needs. A newborn needs a teaspoon of your milk, so that we see this transition from day one to day three. I call day one the sleeping in day, and that's because you've probably heard about the golden hour. The birthing hormones, the labor, delivery, and birthing hormones are a very stimulating hormone. Awakens the baby, alerts the parents. Everybody's on alert when the baby's first born. And then after about an hour, the baby relaxes, the mother relaxes, and they both get really sleepy. That's why we always recommend that you get the baby to the breast within that first hour. And nowadays, even if you need a C section, whether it's a planned C section or an emergency C section, you can still breastfeed that baby that first hour because after that first hour, the baby's going to get really sleepy. And when the baby gets sleepy and you're sleepy, then that's not the time to be breastfeeding for another couple of hours. So that first day is going to be waking up to nurse for, 10 or 15 minutes and getting sleepy again, waking up for another 10 or 15 minutes. By day two, we start to see a shift. The baby is a little bit more alert. And then about the end of day two, we see what's called cluster feeding right before your milk comes in. And we don't know, how does the baby know this? Right before your milk comes in, the baby insists on eating a little more frequently so that it's that practice time. They're practicing getting on the breast, suckling, getting a little bit more of that milk because now they may get even a half a tablespoon of milk when they drink. And then the next day, by day three, is when your more mature milk comes in. That's kind of the chowing down day when they are going to be a little bit more predictable about going back on the breast, waiting an hour or so, then going back on the breast. So understanding you're going to see this transition over 3 days, we're going to expect to see that cluster feeding at day two. It is not a sign that you're not making enough milk. It's a sign that your baby is completely in tune with what he needs and what he can do to help you build up that supply for that next day. So, the truth of the matter is that a baby needs to eat 8 to 10 times in 24 hours. That is, in fact, a baby that is breastfed or formula fed. They need to eat frequently because they have tiny little tummies. So, this is the good news and the bad news about being a new parent is that this is what your newborn is going to need. Fortunately, breastfeeding supplies you with the hormones to relax, the hormones to feel passionate about your baby, the hormones to reduce the stress of being a new parent and allow you to breastfeed your baby frequently like this. And then, of course, by the time the baby's about 2 weeks old, this is a beautiful sight. This is a sight of daddy giving his baby mother's breast milk. This works great. And what I want to underline here is at 2 weeks. The reason is this: if the breasts start to get overly full before that 2 week time period, if the breasts get overly full, a, a protein is released in the milk, which slows down your milk production. And this is what happens if a mother skips breastfeeding during those first 2 weeks. After the breast milk is well established, then the mother can pump and let daddy feed the um, feed the milk, or pump and let their partner or mother-in-law feed the milk. But during those first 2 weeks, skipping a breastfeeding session can slow down your milk production. And then you're a little bit in that kind of downward spiral that you're having to build up back up from. If you start slowing down your milk production, then you can end up with not making the amount of milk you want to make. And so when you think about those first 2 weeks, I want you to think about you successfully breastfeeding your baby, taking the actions that are necessary for you to successfully breastfeed. This is a bit of a challenging time for families. It is also a precious time. It is a time you will never in your life forget how lovely it was to be a new family and to be a breastfeeding family. But it's a lot of work. And so preparing yourself both kind of emotionally and with enthusiasm and with education like you're doing today is so important. Okay, so now we got understand why you're breastfeeding, how the milk is made, and how much and how you're going to put the baby to the breast during those first couple of days. Now let's talk about the act of positioning the baby at the breast. So we're going to talk about a number of positions. This is not one of them, but I thought you would enjoy seeing that little slide. Okay, these are the four positions we're going to talk about. And my beautiful granddaughter is demonstrating these four positions for you. Miss Hazel Bell here is showing you the cross cradle, the football hold, the side lying hold, and the laid back hold. So if you are sitting by a glass of water or whatever, I'd like you to take a little sip and swallow, and then look down, take a little sip, and then look down at your belly button and swallow and feel what that feels like going down. Then take a sip, turn your head to the side and swallow and feel what that feels like going down. And then on that third sip, look up just a little bit. See how much you have to pull your chin up to when you swallow, it easily goes down. That may seem like a silly exercise, but it demonstrates the position you want your baby's head to be in when they're drinking. You don't want them to be drinking, looking down at their belly button. You don't want them to be drinking, looking to the side. You want them to be drinking with their head tilted up just a little bit. So my friend Joy is going to help us demonstrate this for you, both the cross cradle and the football hold.
Now we will discuss bringing the baby to the breast. Proper positioning involves both how the mother holds the baby and how the baby's mouth takes in the breast. Consider the position of your head when you swallow. You will be uncomfortable if you take a drink of water and then swallow with your head turned to the side or glancing down at your toes. Similarly, your baby will be more effective and efficient breastfeeding if her head is tilted slightly upward while she nurses. Let us now review the football and the cross cradle breastfeeding positions, the ones most commonly used for first-time breastfeeding mothers. Keeping in mind the image of a football player running down the field with a ball, a mother using the football position holds the baby in one arm with baby's legs pointing toward the chair. The baby is turned onto her side and placed belly to belly. That means that the baby's belly button faces the mother's skin. In this position, the baby's ear, shoulder, and hip are lined up. Because a new mother can be very focused on the baby's mouth, it is important that she notice if the baby's hip starts to lean outward. When the baby's hip leans outward, her mouth will be pulled ever so slightly away from mother's nipple. This tilting of the hips can cause a shallow and painful latch. Next, consider how mother positions her hands to support the baby's head, neck, and shoulders. If mother holds the baby's head with her entire hand, she is likely to flex the baby's head when pulling him close. This causes the baby to swallow as if looking down at his toes. Breastfeeding works best when mother supports baby's head and neck with her thumb and index finger just below each ear. The palm of the mother's hand adds support at the shoulder level. You are now in a perfect football hold. The second position new mothers most commonly use is the cross cradle. In this position, your right hand helps baby breastfeed from the left breast. Using this position, mother confirms that the baby is, again, belly to belly, that baby's ear, shoulder, and hip are lined up, and that mother's hand is correctly placed. In this position, the mother's left hand is free. Though she may eventually use this hand to drink a cup of tea, most first-time mothers use this free hand to help the baby latch. When using both the football and the cross cradle holds, it is important to keep the baby's lower arm below the breast. You can see here that if the baby pulls her arm up against the chest, it will increase the distance from her mouth to the breast, creating a shallow latch. Since a shallow latch can damage mother's nipple, keep baby's lower arm below mom's breast. Let's try an experiment. Look how quickly this expecting mother notices a mistake I make in bringing the baby to the breast. She sees that the baby has snuck her hand up against her chest, which can cause a painful latch. She commends me for lining up the baby's shoulder, hip, and ear just right. Now she notices that I have my fingers up too high on the baby's head. The mother adjusts my hand so that my thumb and first finger are just below baby's ears.
So those are two very commonly used positions. Um, I like those positions because you can kind of see the baby's mouth pretty easily, and make sure you're comfortable with the latch. Um, the One thing that I like to point out is that your partner really can be a breastfeeding coach. And that's why we love to have the partners coming to this class or reading up on the breastfeeding positions. Because as I mentioned before, the mother is so focused on the mouth that it's sometimes a person standing beside her can see that the baby is getting a little bit out of position. So look at this position. The mother had said to me, "It's hurting me when I breastfeed." And the mother says the baby's latch looks really good. But you can see the hip is rolled out, right? And then the mother, I said, now wait a minute, the hip, the ear, the shoulder are not lined up with the hip. So mother worked to get the hip turned in. And it was better, but still a little uncomfortable. And so then you could see that the hip and the ear are kind of lined up, but the shoulder's a little bit out. So one more adjustment, pulling the baby in so the ear, shoulder, and hip are lined up. Then the mother was comfortable breastfeeding. So the laid back position is a position that some of the hospitals now are teaching mothers to just lean back and put the baby more on top of them to breastfeed. Some mothers can do this well. Some babies can do this well. Some mothers find that the baby needs a little bit more help that they can feel that they can give the baby by sitting up and using those first two positions. But certainly after the baby is about 2 weeks old, mothers can in fact lean back and the baby be across them and comfortably breastfeeding. Again, it just depends on you and your baby. I also like you to know that this sideline position where you lay on your side and then the baby lays completely on her side can be very relaxing to a mother. But you can see that basically mom only has one arm to work with here because the other hand is under her head. And so sometimes a baby is a little bit older, like about 2 or 3 weeks old, before the baby is so good at breastfeeding. As soon as they smell the breast milk, they just go and get themselves on. But remember to try this sideline position when your baby's a couple of weeks old, because as long as your partner or loved one is with you and you're not gonna be falling asleep with the baby in this position without somebody close by watching you. It's a safe position to use. Very relaxing to you because you can relax all these muscles. And I find that some babies who have struggled to breastfeed, that they too can relax their little bodies in this position. So that's kind of the position of the baby. Now let's talk about what's happening inside the baby's mouth. And this video does a great job showing you a graphic of inside the baby's mouth.
Many mothers decide to try breastfeeding because they've learned about its importance to lifelong health and wellness. But to make breastfeeding work, it must be comfortable for you and your baby. Your comfort while you are breastfeeding depends primarily on where your nipple lands in your baby's mouth. And where your nipple lands depends primarily on how your baby takes the breast into his mouth. This is called latch on. To understand how latch on affects your comfort, let's look inside at the roof of a baby's mouth. Behind the baby's gums are ridges. Behind the ridges is the baby's hard palate. When your baby takes your breast into his mouth, if your nipple lands near the front of his mouth, your nipple will press against his hard palate. This is called a shallow latch, which can cause discomfort for you as he breastfeeds. If your baby breastfeeds with a shallow latch repeatedly, the friction and pressure may eventually cause you pain or even skin damage. Farther back in your baby's mouth, the palate changes from hard to soft. Some call the area near this soft palate the comfort zone. To get a better idea of where this is, use your own tongue to find your soft palate. When your baby takes your breast deeply into his mouth and latches on so that your nipple lands in the comfort zone, there is no undue friction or pressure as your baby breastfeeds. Latching on within the comfort zone is where breastfeeding is most comfortable for you and most effective for your baby.
Now, whenever I show that video, the next question that comes up is, what do you do if your nipple's not that long, right? So, in fact, there are all sizes and shapes of nipples, and they're all normal. Just like with belly buttons, any outie and flat belly buttons. Here we have on the left an outie nipple, in the middle a more flat nipple, and on the right a more inverted. All of these are normal nipples. And the good news is that we are breastfeeding, not nipple feeding. We are not just putting the baby over the nipple and getting the baby to suck the nipple. In fact, what we're doing is getting the baby over the nipple onto the breast. When they're over the nipple and onto the breast, the inside of the baby's lip, the moist part of the lip and the moist part of the lip at the bottom lay on the mother's skin. And when it does that, it creates a seal around the baby's mouth. So then when the baby drops her jaw, it creates a vacuum, which causes the milk to come out into the baby's mouth. And so it's really not sucking the milk out of the nipple. It is going over the nipple and creating a seal with the skin of the breast, so that then when the baby drops their jaw, it helps to pull the milk into the baby's mouth. But there is the phenomena of, as the nipple pulls out and goes toward the roof of the mouth, that does help to trigger this a suck reflex. So sometimes an occasional baby with mother with a flatter nipple will need a little bit extra practice to get that sucking going, since they're not having initially much bouncing of the nipple against the roof of the mouth. And the reason I say initially is that all mothers, when they start to breastfeed, the nipple actually elongates inside the baby's mouth. But then when the baby comes off the breast, oftentimes the nipple just returns to that same position. So the mother may not notice that it's elongating like that. And at this point, I do mention a piece of equipment that is available at your birth center or your hospital, and it's called a nipple shield. I'm showing you here. It is the thinnest piece of plastic that can lay over the nipple. And what happens is, if a mother has a really shallow nipple, that if she puts the nipple shield on for a couple of days, the nipple shield kind of bounces against the roof of the baby's mouth. And that helps to trigger that suck reflex. So you don't need to be able to analyze whether you need this or not, because your nurse or your midwife, they're specialists in knowing if you need to use this. It's not necessary for most mothers, and it's not necessary for most mothers with flat nipples. But just to let you know that there is such a thing, if you did have a problem, it could be solved with that for a day or two while the baby's learning to breastfeed. Let me just add that I noticed a couple of chat questions came in. If you have a question, go ahead and send them to me. If I haven't answered them, it's because I know I'm going to answer them in just a minute. A question did come in about, how common is that second night syndrome, that cluster feeding? Well, it's almost universal. I mean, babies will cluster feed because they're getting hungrier as mother's milk's coming in. But shoot me those other questions that come up. Make sure we get to them. Okay, so we talked about whether to use the nipple shield or not. But one thing that I see in hospitals that, where they're just seeing lots and lots of patients all day long, we don't want the nipple shield to be solving a problem if we don't know what the problem is. So sometimes you can kind of plop on a nipple shield and you're not really figuring out what the problem is. So if it's recommended that you use a nipple shield, just have an idea about how long you should use it and what you should do about stopping using the shield. Okay. So another technique to know about is what we call making a sandwich. And this sweet baby is in a situation where either the baby has a small mouth or mom has a really bigger nipple or bigger breast. Sometimes if the mother just very gently compresses her breast as it's kind of hard to show you. Here we go. Compresses the breast. It just makes it easier for the baby to get on. So it's sort of like if you go to the Subway and you get you a big old Subway sandwich, you don't just like shove it against your face, right? You kind of compress it down so you can take a bite. And it's the same idea. Um, Okay. So now you got the baby positioned, you got the baby latched, and now I want you to look down at the baby's mouth. And this is what you're going to be seeing. First of all, we hope you're going to be seeing the baby on the left here. What we see on the baby on the left is a wide open mouth. See how wide that opening is, as opposed to the baby on the right is a very tiny angle there, not open very wide. So the baby on the right is nipple feeding, and mother will not appreciate that. So if you look down and it hurts, it pinches, and you see a tiny little mouth, you got to take the baby off and wait for him to open big and then go back on the breast. We want that wide open mouth. Sometimes, if it's not wide enough, mom can take her index finger and just put it on the baby's chin and actually pull the chin down a little bit, and the baby will open wider and it'll be more comfortable. Now, the next thing we're going to see is that the lip is flared upward. Remember, I told you the moist inside of the upper lip and lower lip is what we want laying against mom's breast. And so as mom looks down, she can see that the inside, the moist part of the lip is laying against her breast. If it was a little bit like this, mom could actually put her finger down and just flip the lip up like that, and that can sometimes can be immediately more comfortable. The next thing we want to do is the demonstration we saw with the positioning. We want to pull the baby close, because sometimes just letting the baby drift, this much away can put tension on the nipple. But when mom has her hand behind the baby's shoulder blades and just snuggles the baby in closer, that's going to be more comfortable. And then this is a really exciting technique I want every one of you to know, and we call it breast compression. So, you've probably heard that if you've got a sleepy baby, you've heard the kind of things parents will do. Well, they'll tickle the baby's feet, they'll rub the baby's head, they'll put a cold rag on the baby's face. Well, all of that works for some babies. Actually, for some babies, it overstimulates them and makes them get sleepier. But here's a technique that works for most babies. When the baby is starting to get a little sleepy, if mom reaches across and touches the upper outs of her breast and puts a little compression there, all of a sudden the baby will start eating more again. And that's because you're actually kind of pushing a little bit of those full ducts of milk, kind of pushing it down the highway into the baby's mouth. So here's a baby that does a great job demonstrating the success of using breast compression.
This 5-day old baby hesitates frequently during his breastfeeding session. I encourage mother to use compression to increase secretion of the fatty milk from the upper outer portion of her breast. Rather quickly, we see the baby's jaw drop as he takes long, deep draws of milk from the breast. When the mother stops compressing, the baby slows down his suckling. When mother compresses again, the baby resumes his effective nursing pattern.
So write yourself a little note about that so that two times this can be very effective. One is if the baby is sleepy and slows down on their breastfeeding, and the other is if you need to get more calories to your baby. So just yesterday, I had a mother call me. She had come to my class, so she knew that she was having a little bit of a problem and wanted to take care of it before it became a big problem. The baby had had newborn jaundice, and that makes babies a little sleepier. And she says, the baby's just so relaxed at the breast. I have a hard time keeping him nursing. And so I reminded her about the compression. And what was exciting is she'd gone to the pediatrician that day, and the pediatrician had said, well, why don't you go ahead and start using some formula with your breastfeeding? But the mother was ambivalent about that. But what was interesting, in 24 hours of using the compression, the baby increased her nursing, increased her stools to tell us that she was getting more calories, and mom did not need to add formula. So using that compression will increase the calories because there's a lot of kind of fatty milk up high in the breast, and by giving a little bit of pressure like that on the breast, you can get some of that fatty milk down to the baby. So I have a couple of important questions coming in about my opinion about supplementing for breastfeeding mothers. So the benefits of breastfeeding, of exclusive breastfeeding, are clearly higher than the benefits of mixed feedings. There is an occasional mother whose breast tissue does not make enough milk. And in that case, a mother can either supplement with donor milk or supplement with formula. And there are ways to do that as sort of better for baby and better for mother. But truly, the majority of women can make enough breast milk. And the problem with supplementing is that sometimes supplementing communicates to the breast that the breast can slow down their milk production. And so, what I'm aiming for in this presentation today is that you'll all be able to meet your breastfeeding goals, but also to let you know that there are actions that you take that will build up a more robust supply of milk and allow you to exclusively breastfeed your baby. There is that occasional situation that is sort of a more of an emergency. And then we know that those babies will also benefit from breastfeeding, but not as quite as high an incident as the babies who are exclusively breastfeeding.
This
Okay, so I mentioned that if you get the baby on the breast and it hurts you with the baby breastfeeding, the way you take the baby off is just putting your finger in the corner of the mouth. And you can imagine when you do that, it lets in a little air and the baby will just slip right off the nipple. So, no one wants to have pain with breastfeeding. So, I want you to know that there are two kinds of pain with breastfeeding. There's 30-second pain and ongoing pain. And remember how I said when a mother first starts breastfeeding, if she's got, I always have a hard time trying to show you this with my hands. Okay, here's the outside and here's the inside of the breast and here's the nipple. All right. Say a mom has a little bit of a longer nipple and it's a little bit easier for the baby to get over. If the baby mother has a little bit shorter nipple, when the baby starts to breastfeed, the nipple actually comes out further. The tissue that holds it stretches, that holds it in the breast stretches a little bit and comes out further. When that first nipple first starts to come out, mothers sometimes will describe a tug, a pinch, or even pain when it first comes out. It only lasts 30 seconds for the first 1 or 2 days of breastfeeding. After that, it comes out easily and you have no pain. So it's sort of like the first day you go out jogging. You know, you come back, your calves are a little sore, but you stretch your calves, and in a day or two, when you go out jogging, your calves aren't sore. So 30 seconds of pain that totally goes away, and then after, and it goes away completely in a day or two, that can be normal pain or discomfort. However, any pain that persists is a sign that you need some help, that there's either a problem with how the baby's getting on, or the baby's mouth, or how you're holding the baby. So, ongoing pain, it does not mean your nipples need to toughen up. I had a mother tell me that the nurse at the hospital told her, well, you just need for your nipples to toughen up. That is not true. What you need is help getting the baby successfully on the breast. All right. So we'll also hear mothers say, should I breastfeed from one side or should I breastfeed from both sides? So the recommendation is during the first 2 weeks to breastfeed on one side and then the other side. The average mother has about an ounce and a half of milk on one breast and about an ounce and a half of milk on another breast, which, guess what? That's exactly what a baby needs. However, some mothers, as their milk supply develops, they are what we call overproducers. Some mothers can have 3 or 4 ounces on one breast and 3 or 4 ounces on the other breast. When the baby gets to be about 2 weeks old, these mothers can tell that they have more milk. And those babies will learn to successfully breastfeed on like the right breast this time, and the next time the left breast. But what I recommend for you is to breastfeed on one breast the first time and the second breast right away at each feeding. I have another question about building up milk supply. We'll get to that in a minute too. Okay, so how can you tell if your baby's hungry? Well, here are two ways to tell. Both of these babies are saying, Mom, I'm a little hungry. Which baby would you hear? Which way would you like to hear your baby to be signaling they're a little hungry? So there's sort of what we call early signs of hunger. And then there are what we call late signs of hunger. The baby at the bottom is showing an early sign of hunger. The baby at the top is showing a late sign of hunger. And so let's learn what those early signs, how the baby's saying, Mom, I'm starting to get a little hungry now. There's just enough time for you to pop by the bathroom and get yourself a cup of tea, because then I'm going to be ready to eat. These are early signs of hunger. So this is what the baby's doing. He's bringing his hand up to his mouth. He's smacking his lips. He's wiggling and squirming a little bit. He's saying, Mom, I'm starting to get hungry. Let's look at these one more time. He's bringing his hand up to his mouth. He's smacking his lips. And then he's wiggling and squirming. He's starting to say, I'm starting to get a little hungry. If you don't notice that, he's going to be crying like the baby on the top picture here. And you know, when you're a new parent, you're not going to see this at first. It's going to take you a couple of times. But remind yourself to be looking for those early signs of hunger. Now, there's something that you often see babies done for babies during their first week or so of life, which will interfere with your ability to notice these early feeding cues. What could it be? This is what it is. What happens when we swaddle that little baby during those first 2 weeks? When we swaddle that little baby, she won't be able to get her hand up to her mouth. She won't be able to wiggle and squirm. And so this little baby may not be able to tell you that she's hungry until she starts crying. So the American Academy of Pediatrics and lactation specialists recommend that you put off swaddling a baby until they're 2 weeks old. That's right, until they're 2 weeks old. And the reason is you want to be able to spot those early signs of hunger. And actually, what we notice is that the baby who swaddle is only gonna be about 10 or 15 minutes later. So it's not going to be giving you 2 or 3 extra hours of sleep. But by breastfeeding that baby before she starts crying is is actually easier to do because you don't have to try to both be calming the baby down and getting the baby on the breast. When you start seeing those early signs of hunger, you can get yourself situated, get your glass of water, get your pillows right, get the baby on the breast before they're upset and crying. After 2 weeks, after breastfeeding is well established, then swaddling will not interfere with the baby's breastfeeding. So, we're going to talk about helping that baby sleep. And actually, we're going to do that tomorrow in our class about understanding a baby's behavior. Okay, pacifiers are the same as swaddling. The use of a pacifier, it pacifies the baby, it calms the baby down, but it also prevents them from letting us know that they're starting to get a little hungry. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has the same recommendation. Avoid swaddling and avoid pacifier use until breastfeeding is well established at about 2 weeks of age, because we want your baby to be able to kind of raise their hand and say, Mom, I'm just a little bit hungry now. It often reminds me of Thanksgiving. My brother in law is an awesome chef and he cooks us Thanksgiving dinner. And he always has it around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it gets to be noon and I'm a little bit hungry, but I think, well, the big turkey's coming. Then it's 2 o'clock and I'm like, I'm a little bit more hungry. By 3 o'clock, I'm hungry, grumpy. I mean, I'm not crying, but I'm almost crying, right? And so we know that feeling of when you get almost overly hungry, that when you start to eat, it takes a while to even feel satisfied. So, again, that's part of why we want our babies to be able to communicate those early signs of hunger. Now, this is a lovely thing to know about your baby. It's called the breastfeeding coma, and it's caused by the most amazing ingredient in your breast milk called cholecystokinin. It's a protein that's in your breast milk. As you breastfeed, your baby gets this substance, and it has two functions. It helps with baby's digestion and it relaxes the baby. Actually, when it's released, it relaxes you as a breastfeeding mother. And what happens is you put the baby on the breast, and then as the baby drinks your breast milk, in about 10 or 15 minutes, that CCK starts to rise and it makes the baby really sleepy. So let's watch this baby. This baby's going to first show us an early feeding cue. The mother's going to breastfeed the baby, and then we're going to see this amazing breastfeeding coma. So here he is. He's starting to have some early feeding cues, wiggling, squirming, smacking his lips a little bit. Mama picks him up, puts him on the breast. She breastfeeds him, and then this is what happens. It's hilarious, really. He is so relaxed, so relaxed. And this is when everybody says, Oh, I wish I could sleep like a newborn. But what he's doing is having the impact of that CCK. And if you had not come to this class, you may think, oh, he's done eating, he's finished eating. And then you'd put him in the cradle to sleep. And then in 10 minutes, he would start smacking his lip, wiggling and squirming, and maybe even crying. And you think, oh my goodness, I didn't have enough milk. But see, that's not the case. What happened is that he had this reaction to this CCK. You came to class, you know this is the case. And so instead, what you do is after the baby breastfeeds on one breast, just put that baby up skin to skin. Hold that baby and cuddle for 5 minutes, maybe sometimes 10 minutes. And in just a minute, the baby will start wiggling again, smacking her lips, and then you move her down to breastfeed on the other breast. Then, when the baby starts getting all sleepy again, she's really done with her meal and can be put down to breastfeed. This is such an important thing to you for you to know because you can understand if a mother saw this, she would think, I don't have enough milk. And this is when we see mothers doing things like adding formula when they didn't need to add formula. Okay, so now how do you know if baby's getting enough to eat? Actually, this is very easy. And the reason is breastfeeding babies are going to tell us both with their weight and with their poops. So all newborns will lose weight when they first are born. Mother Nature knows that babies need to learn to breastfeed. Mother Nature knows that you need to learn to breastfeed. So babies are born with a little extra fluid. They're born a little waterlogged so that they can lose some weight and it's not a problem. So the average breastfeeding baby is going to lose between 7 and 10% of their weight. And this is totally normal when your baby's born and then when you're discharged from the hospital or the birth center, the nurse or midwife will do the math for this on this for you and say, "Oh, your baby's doing great. She's lost about 3% of weight." And then all of you will be given a follow up appointment, usually on about day 3, 4, or 5. You're going to want to weight check then because on about day 5 is when that weight turns around and the baby starts to gain weight again. So when you go to that 4 day visit and you get a weight check, the doctor says, perfect, your baby's down about 5%, just what we would expect. And then you get to pay attention to those poops because guess what? Poops do not lie. If your baby is having the right amount and the right color poops, this is perfect proof that your baby is getting enough calories. They will not be able to poop like this if they're not getting enough calories. So, this is what you're looking for. On day 1 and 2, the baby has black meconium poops. They're black sticky poops that are all the substance that are inside the baby's intestines when the baby first gets born. Day 1, 1 poop. Day 2, 2 poops. By day 3 and 4, they're transitioning from black to green. On day 3, 3 poops. On day 4, 4 poops. By day 5 and 6, they're transitioning to the kind of normal breastfeeding color, which is yellow. It looks like Dijon mustard. It's like you squirted Dijon mustard onto the diaper. It does not look like a little turd when you take your dog for the walk. It will not look like a little turd until your baby starts having solid foods at about 6 months old. So, yellow, smooth, kind of loose stools is the normal breastfeeding stool. 5 of them yellow on day 5, 6 of them on day 6. So if you're home and it's day 3 and your baby has had 3 green stools, then you know he's getting enough calories. If you're on day 6 and your baby has 3 green stools, you call me up or you call up the midwife because that means your baby needs a little more calories. If you call me up, the first thing I would say, do you remember about that compression? Do that little bit of compression. I might ask you, are you swaddling the baby? And you say, well, my mother in law just really insisted that I swaddle the baby. Well, unswaddle the baby for 2 days and let's see what happens. You call back the next day, 6 yellow poops on day 6. So, see, your poops are your baby's way of letting you know, super duper, I'm okay, or let's get a little bit of help early on before there's a problem. Most people will count the number of wet diapers. The wet diapers tell us that the baby is getting enough fluid. But the thing is, if your baby's getting enough poops, we know your baby's getting enough fluid. And actually, today's diapers are so good at absorbing fluid. If your baby only pees, it's even hard to tell from the diaper if the baby peed. So the P's are not important to keep a track of as long as you keep a track of all these poops. Now, you know that there are some trackers that can do this for you on your app. These are fun to use. You might enjoy using them, but I am like a little old fashioned for this reason. You know, if you've got the app on your phone and you breastfeed your baby, and then you're going to lay down for a nap, and grandma takes the baby out for a rock in the rocking chair, and you got the phone in there with you, when that baby poops, grandma may forget to tell you to add that poop to the app. So for the first week, you are really want to know how many poops the baby has. So I recommend this really old-fashioned idea of sticking a piece of paper up over the changing table and letting whoever is changing the diaper just put a little check mark for how many poops a baby has had. That way you everyone will be certain that you've counted all those poops, because that's going to be very reassuring to you. Okay. So, gosh, didn't we talk about a lot of things? And I'm paying attention to your questions. We're going to get to these, but let's stop for a minute and listen to a story. Here is a mother breastfeeding her 4-week-old baby. She adores breastfeeding. She admits that she was ambivalent about breastfeeding. She said, "Well, I was going to try breastfeeding." And then I went to that breastfeeding class, and my goodness, it turned out that I have been so happy breastfeeding, so successful breastfeeding. So let's ask this question: what two actions did this mother take during her pregnancy that brought her to this point of being successful? So type me in a little chat. What did she do during her pregnancy that brought her to the point of being successful as a breastfeeding mother? Let me see what comes to mind. What did she do? So, Lindsay and Jennifer reminded me that she went to a breastfeeding class. It is really true. Can you imagine not having this information? It really matters. Here's another suggestion. She talked to her mother in law and husband about her desire to breastfeed. You know what? That's important. It's important to be sure that the people in your community understand your feelings about breastfeeding. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. This another person said she talked to her girlfriend who also loved to breastfeed, so she knew where her support was coming from. That's right. And she had a birth plan, because there some we're going to talk about in a second, some of the issues around birth can impact the breastfeeding experience. Okay, yay. The reason I like to start there is that you are already on the road to breastfeeding success because you are here learning about breastfeeding. So, what action did the mother take those first 3 days after her baby's born? The first 3 days of her baby's birth. What actions did this mother take to be sure she would meet her breastfeeding needs? These are really important because it's kind of an exciting and crazy time those first 3 days. So the mother's got to decide, what am I going to do? What will I do to be sure I'm successful breastfeeding? What comes to mind? Skin to skin care. You can't beat skin to skin care for increasing your ability to breastfeed. Noticing those feeding cues, not swaddling the baby. Honestly, some of the hospitals around here swaddle a baby. You can say, I prefer to keep a little t-shirt on my baby and not swaddle my baby because I'm watching for those early feeding cues. That's right. When the baby's on position, when the baby's on the breast, watching that the ear, hip, and shoulder are lined up. Great, great idea. And watching for that good latch. When the baby's latched, looking down, that the mouth is wide open, the lip is turned up. The babies, you're using your hand to pull the shoulders in close. So, see, there are many steps that you will take that will contribute to and help you meet your breastfeeding goals. Now, this is even a little trickier. Think about, though, you're back at home now, that first week at home and that second week at home. What do you do during that first and second week to help to promote building up your milk supply? So, having your partner help you use that little grasp reflex to sort of calm the baby so you can latch the baby. That's right. Watching those poops and counting those poops, both the color and the number. So, see, black, green, yellow, day one, day two, day three, day four, day five, day six. That's great. Frequent feedings, right? Oh, I love this, limiting the visitors. And of course, it's a little easier during COVID times, but it's kind of like riding a bike for the first time. Can you imagine if you had invited all of your relatives to come and watch you as a 5-year-old get on a bicycle for the first time? That probably would have been intimidating. And you may not want to learn to breastfeed with a bunch of people watching you. So decide who you want around you, who is going to be able to support you, who can you be with that'll allow you the vulnerability and the trial and error about learning to breastfeed. So see, the point of this exercise is that oftentimes mothers will say to me, well, I'm going to try to breastfeed. Well, there really are actions that will cause you to be successful breastfeeding so that you will practice breastfeeding, but it's beyond trying. You will have your goal in mind and take the actions that need to be taken to succeed in your breastfeeding goals. All righty. Then, when your baby gets to be 2 weeks old, now is the time that we will see the baby returning to their breast weight, returning to their breast weight. That's not what I mean to say. Returning to their birth weight when the baby is 2 weeks old. Sometime between 10 days and 2 weeks, a breastfeeding baby will return to their birth weight. After their time, the baby gains about 5 to 7 ounces in a week. So that's sort of about a half an ounce or an ounce a day. And it depends on sort of the size of the baby, how much they're going to gain. And they're going to continue to have those wet diapers and uh, poops like this. Now, at about 6 weeks old, mother's normal breast milk starts changing. So then the poops start to drop off. But up till about 4 weeks, the baby's going to continue to have about 6 stools a day. Okay. So let me just glance back at here at our questions. Um, I know we have this issue about using swallowing to help a baby sleep at night, and I am going to talk more specifically about that tomorrow in our class because I want you to understand that sort of the bigger picture about infant sleep to be able to answer that question. Yeah, and we've got some questions about collecting colostrum, which I'm going to talk about. Okay, so let's think about solving problems. So you may have heard of engorgement. I have a funny picture here of engorgement and a sprained ankle because actually they're the same phenomena. So what happens, and we don't understand why this happens with some mothers, but some mothers, when their milk first starts to come in at about day 3, 4, 5, more like day 4 and 5, their breast, the way I think about it, is the breasts get overly excited about this milk coming in. Actually, if they've never seen breast milk before, these breasts haven't, they get overly excited. And so they send an inflammatory response. And so the breast can get overly swollen. And when that happens, it is not because you have 2 gallons of milk in your breast. It is because your breast had an inflammatory reaction, just like when you sprain your ankle. If you sprain your ankle, the body sends a bunch of white blood cells to kind of um, heal the tissue. In engorgement, the body sends a bunch of white blood cells in response to kind of the excitement of first making milk. So you treat them the same. You put a cold compress on them, you take ibuprofen, and you frequently nurse, because as you keep the breast milk flowing, that seems to calm down this inflammatory response. What you don't need to do is pump. Mothers think, oh my gosh, I got all this milk in here, I must need to be to pump. And then they pump and they only get, like a quarter of an ounce. That's because the problem is not too much milk. It is an inflammatory reaction. So just think twisted ankle and you'll know what to do. Now, some mothers, their milk is slower coming in. And I want you to know about this because we can totally fix this problem, but you need to know if this happens. So, these are the situations that can make mother's milk a little slower coming in. There's some research that older mothers, over the first time mothers having their baby over 35, that can be their milk can be slower coming in. I actually don't see that much. So I don't worry about that so much. If you've had breast surgery, if you've had just a um a needle biopsy, that does not usually interfere with milk production. But certainly if you've had enlargement surgery or reduction surgery, that can cause a delay in your milk coming in. So talk to your midwife or doctor or lactation person ahead of time if you've had significant breast surgery, because we will need to plan around that. Then there are some conditions that seem to be associated with a little slowdown in the milk: polycystic ovary disease, thyroid disease, diabetes, hypertension, obesity. If you've had these issues prenatally, again, chat with the people that are around to help you, because we can solve these problems as long as we kind of watch for them and have a plan to respond. Then sometimes things happen in labor and delivery that you didn't anticipate. You can, for instance, have a little bit of elevated blood pressure, hypertension during the labor, delivery, or postpartum time, a prolonged labor lasting more than a day, excessive blood loss, but even a C section, because a C section is surgery and it's a bit of a shock to your system. So sometimes mothers with a C section, their milk can be a day or two later coming in. So, knowing this ahead of time, there are actions you can take that can be beneficial. One is to know that all of your hospitals and birth centers will have what's called donor milk. Donor milk is mothers who were super producers donated their milk to the hospital. It is pasteurized and sterilized in the same way that blood is prepared to donate in a hospital. So if a mother is worried or sooner has, it looks like the milk is slower coming in, she can go home with a couple of bottles of donor milk or get it later from a milk bank. The other thing you can do is learn about expressing the milk, hand expressing. And so I have a little video here on how to hand express the milk, which can be done. I'm going to tell you, it can be done both prenatally and when the baby's born.
Many mothers benefit from a nurse teaching her how to hand express colostrum, especially if the baby is extra sleepy on day one of life. As shown here on this breast model, the mother first places her hand in a C shape around the areola and nipple. Next, she pushes breast tissue back toward her chest wall, compresses the breast tissue, and then releases it to express a small amount of colostrum. Hand expression will increase milk production and help if breasts are engorged.
So what there's more and more literature about is if you are a mother that is in one of those risk categories, say for instance, you have diabetes or hypertension, or you're going to have a C-section because you have a breech baby. What can be recommended is starting about 3 weeks before your due date is to practice hand expressing. You can collect the colostrum in these tiny little syringes that you can buy at the drugstore, freeze it, and then carry it to the hospital with you and give it to your baby after birth. It seems that what we understand about this, it has two benefits. First of all, there is really some great studies that if you're using colostrum that you've saved, that the chances of the baby needing any formula, especially if you have diabetes and um, it prevents the baby from having a low blood sugar to use the colostrum. But the other thing that seems really important is this hand expressing prenatally teaches you how to hand express, and also kind of revs up the breast, gets them more ready to produce milk from the beginning. So, most any mother, it is safe to do hand expressing. The exception would be a mother who is having premature labor. If a mother is put on bed rest because of premature labor, it's not recommended to breastfeed. I'm sorry, to hand express, because those mothers the hand expressing may trigger a little bit more contraction of the uterus. So, if you are in one of those risk categories, or if you would like to do some hand expressing, and some moms do it once a day, some moms do it at the most twice a day, and they may only get the tiniest amount, but it can be saved for your baby. And there's some good resources over the internet to show you how to do this. But talk to your midwife or doctor about that. Now, when to start pumping? The reason I didn't talk about this earlier is that I think if you've got one of these awesome pumps, I would keep it in the closet until your baby is 2 weeks old. The only time to pump during those first 2 weeks is if you have a problem to solve. So, for instance, I told the story of a mother with a early baby, a baby born, say, 3 or 4 weeks early, and the baby was having a little bit trouble getting a full feeding. The muscles were still developing in the baby's cheeks. Then that mother could use her pump to pump once or twice a day, and that would be a useful that would be a good way to use the breast pump. But most of you will not need to pump. You've got plenty to do during those first 2 weeks, and you don't need to be pumping until you get to about that 2 week time. That's a perfect time. You'll be confident that in your breast milk you can pump, and then let your partner feed that baby your milk. It's really a lovely experience. At the same time, if we are solving a problem, say you again have an early baby, there are some special nipples and a special technique for that your lactation specialist would let you know about. And again, you don't need to remember this. You just need to remember that if you're needing a little bit of help early on, your lactation person might recommend a position for breastfeeding and a bottle to use. Now, this is a tongue tie. Anyone could look in this mouth and see that that tongue is looking different than most tongues. A tongue tie makes it hard for the baby to get their tongue out enough to surround the nipple. And the symptoms for the mother are painful latch. So if you have most of these like this are noticed right at birth, there's a tiny procedure where they just can clip the front of that little piece of skin, and the baby gets right on the breast and everybody's happy. There's a little bit harder one to diagnose, which is called a posterior tongue tie. So these are one of the things we check if you continue to have pain with breastfeeding. As I say, it's not because you need to toughen up your nipples. So if you persist with having pain, your doctor, nurse, midwife, ENT can check to make sure your baby doesn't have a tongue tie. The other thing I like you to know about is plug ducts. Sometimes when mom's milk starts coming in all toward with success there after the end of the second week or third week, you can get a little sore spot in the breast. You know what it feels like? Back in the day, a teenager, it would always happen like 2 weeks before the prom. You would get the feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to get a pimple right here. You couldn't see it yet, but you could just feel a sore spot. It's like that in the breast. If you feel a sore spot, this is a very cool trick. Babies have their strongest suction above the nose and below the chin. So, what you can become an expert at is putting babies on the breast so that little nose or that little chin points toward that sore spot. And it will just in one or two feedings unplug that sore spot and get the milk flowing again. So, like for instance, this mother has got a sore spot at around, what's that, around 2 o'clock on her left breast. So she puts the baby in the cross cradle with that nose pointing right toward that sore spot. And just within one or two feeding, that spot's not sore anymore. This mother has a sore spot at about 12 o'clock on her right breast. She just leans back, puts that baby on the breast with that nose pointing right toward that sore spot. And just in one or two feedings, that sore spot's gone. The reason we want that sore spot to be gone is that if it stays plugged up, it can lead to mastitis, which is an infection of the breast. So, when a mother first starts to breastfeed, she kind of can feel some lumpiness all around the breast as the breast is churning up and making more and more milk. But as you get into your rhythm of breastfeeding at around 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and you notice a single area of soreness, that's when you would want to see if you could move the positioning of your baby around in order to unplug that duct, or certainly be in touch with a lactation specialist about that. Just to let you know some of the resources that I have available for you. Also, join me on my social media because I have frequent little videos coming up reminding you about breastfeeding, early parenting, and also some important studies that have to do with early parenting that you would want to know about. And certainly do share this class with your friends and colleagues. I'd appreciate that. I have been offering this class at no charge during COVID times, and also have invited professionals who just want more experience thinking about how to teach parents about breastfeeding. I am available for lactation consultation after your baby's born. And I am just so happy to say how successful it's been doing virtual breastfeeding consultation. It has just been remarkable to me that we can hold up a phone or get on Zoom and figure out how to help a latch or positioning or a milk supply issue. So you can access my contact information on my website. Send me an email and we can be in touch. Okay, so it's the end of the class today. So we're going to end with a very fun musical performance by a lovely lactation consultant from California. And this, every time I see this, it makes me really happy. And what it's going to be is a very fun review of everything that you've learned today. And it lasts about 2 minutes. And then, if you came today as a professional, I know that several of you did. If you would please hang on after this song is over, because I'd like to ask a couple of follow-up questions from you about the kind of work you do and about this information. I'd really appreciate 5 minutes of your time. So let's watch this song as a farewell, and best wishes to all of you in your breastfeeding journey.
Like tea. Can you teach me how to breastfeed? I heard it's free, and all my baby really need. Yo, listen up, grab your partner, and I'll show you how. It's super easy and the best way to feed your child. Hold your baby close and let him pick a side. Nose to nipple will help her open really wide. Lay back and put your baby on top of you. Get comfy and watch what little man can do. If he's on right, it shouldn't hurt you. Don't worry if the other side squirts too. When you feed her, don't watch the clock, cause baby girl knows just when to stop. Skin to skin keeps your baby nice and warm. Cross cradle, support your baby in your arms. It may take time, but be patient. Feed her on demand. Don't keep that baby waiting. Teach me how to breastfeed. 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 All the babies love it. All the babies love it. All the babies love it. You ain't messing with my breast milk. Filled with lots of vitamins plus immune protection that only you can give. The first milk, we call it liquid gold, perfect for a newborn. That's only 1 day old. It's super sticky and it's thick like honey, just the right amount to fill your baby's tiny tummy. So when you see that poop and you want to scream, by day 2, it should go from black to green. If his poops are frequent and a mustard yellow, you're doing
into your baby's eyes. You can be an A cup or a triple D. You'll still make all the milk your baby needs. Healthy and strong, your baby will surely grow. A bond that lasts forever. Only you will know. Teach me how to breastfeed. 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 All the babies love it. All the babies love it. All the babies love it. You ain't messing with my breast milk.
Isn't that fun? Well, thank you for joining us today. And go to my website for more information and certainly to be in touch if you have a couple of questions when your baby comes. Take care.